Hello, my name is Benjamin Hart. I'm an American attorney and the managing director of Integrity Legal here in Bangkok, Thailand. As the title of this video suggests, it's kind of an odd video in a way. We're talking about O and OA retirement visas in the context of work permits. This is one of those situations where I was reading something and I realized it could be kind of an interesting, I hesitate to call it a teaching point, but I guess that's really the only word for it, where to analogize two things that don't look very similar, but they have some similarity if you kind of look a little deeper. With respect to the O and OA retirement visa, for those who are unaware, there are differences between those. We'll get into that in a moment. And for those who are unaware, retirement visas do not confer work authorization. Work permits, which are usually issued on either business visas or marriage visas here in Thailand, unless there's a specialty visa issued out there with work authorization attached, work permits are not generally associated with retirement visas, which is why this video may seem odd, but hopefully as I get into the analysis, folks will see why I'm doing this, to kind of create an analogy so people can understand both things better, hopefully. But the reason I thought of making this video is I was reading a recent article in the Pattaya Mail, that's pattayamail.com. Article's titled, "Pattaya's Labor Problems Can Only Be Solved by Myanmar Recruitment." Quoting directly, according to City Hall, there are at least ongoing 40 projects in Pattaya and adjoining areas which require a foreign labor input. These include public and private sector building enterprises, road repairs and reclamation developments, as well as jobs in factories, hotels, and food. There is also a totally separate category of expats, many from Europe, who are found mostly in teaching and senior management and come under different work permit rules and tax regulations from neighboring economic migrants. So, what are we talking about here? It's this, and I quote, separate category of expats. It's not really all that separate, in a sense. Every foreigner is viewed as such under Thai law with respect to needing work authorization. Only Thais can work in Thailand without work authorization. Now, there has been sort of a division, I call it kind of a division of labor within Thai immigration and the work authorization authorities, where they've sort of said, look, we've got folks from Myanmar, Laos, Cambodia, sometimes Vietnam, sometimes to an extent Malaysia, but really the main ones you really see a lot of is Laos, Cambodia, Myanmar. And we've got a lot of folks coming in from these countries as migrant labor that are oftentimes oftentimes you see them in things like construction and things like this. They have a different division of labor, as I call it, and they kind of fall, and as such, they fall under kind of a different regulatory scheme. So it's not unlike the way that OA retirement visas and O retirement visas, they're both retirement visas, they fall under the same overarching sort of thematic legal umbrella within an immigration context, but they are two different things. As we've noted in other videos, OA retirement visas require insurance, for example. That insurance requirement seems to be set to go up here in the fourth quarter of 2022, whereas O retirees do not need insurance. It's something we've discussed in other videos. That's just one example. There are some other differences sort of in application and how you deal with getting each of those different types of visas. But at the end of the day, they're both visas issued to people who want to retire in Thailand for retirement. What we're talking about with work permits is sort of the difference between migrant labor and so-called migrant labor, and then another type of migrant labor, which is sort of the wider world, as they say, expats, forongs. There's always kind of been this, and I've done videos on this in the past, where we kind of talk about, there seems to be it is kind of an odd thing where foreign nationals that come to a place like Southeast Asia call themselves expats, but folks that would go to, say, the United States or Canada or the UK are called immigrants. I've always viewed myself as an immigrant to Thailand. In a sense, you could, as I've discussed in another video, my first year here, I kind of considered myself an expat, and then at a certain point, I said, hey, I am what I am. I'm an immigrant. I've immigrated to Thailand. In any event, I don't know, there is kind of a difference in terminology there, but back to what we were saying, there's kind of this, if you want to call it two-tiered, it's just bifurcated, this kind of differentiation between, again, the migrant labor that comes from the land borders surrounding countries, surrounding Thailand here, versus, folks that come in from abroad, say United States or Europe or something. that come in, get a standard work permit, maintain work permit status here in Thailand. Yeah, there is kind of a different division of labor. Now, they do both fall under the same overarching laws. Now, there may be regulatory differences in how you deal with, for example, a migrant worker from Myanmar versus somebody who comes in from, say, Germany and wants to be work authorized here in Thailand. Yeah, practically, it's not going to operate the same. And I know it's a semantic point, but you got to remember things like the emergency decree regarding migrant labor, which happened back in 2019, which we discussed pretty well at length at the time. It had fundamental changes on work permits for everyone. That had changes on work permit policy with respect to things like, location of work, job description. That had ramifications which kind of transcended all the different foreign sort of work divisions of labor, like within the Thai bureaucracy. That impacted everybody that was a foreign national working in Thailand. So again, they are different. There's a kind of a differentiation between migrant labor versus work permits, but in much the same way that, yes, there is a difference between OA retirees and O retirees, it's kind of a matter of degree. It's not a substantive difference in the sense that they're fundamentally a different thing. They just operate under slightly different regulatory schemes.